do. And the main segment of today's show is taking a look at the wide receivers in this 2021 draft class. So I asked the guys to take a look and get some opinions on where they wanted to rank everyone. What we'll do is just, first of all, get a rough idea of where the top three sit. I think the top three in the draft, it's a very clear top three, and everyone has agreed on that. You've got Ja'Marr Chase, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Waddle, and they're clearly seen as the top three prospects who will almost certainly be going in the first round. But where does everyone see those fitting? Henry, who do you see as a number one wide receiver of the group?
Yeah, if we're going wide receiver with that tag exclusively, then for me it's Ja'Marr Chase. So a couple of weeks ago, or towards the end of the season, when Devonta Smith was on his crazy tear in the national championship game, I did say that he'd overtaken Chase as my top receiver going into the draft class. Having had some time to review the tape now, it's clear to me that Chase is the number one. It's a great class. That's what I'd like to say. You know, the top three, but also I think there's some really nice depth in the back of the first round and second and third. So yeah, really looking forward to discussing a bit more of this. Receiver wise, might be a bit of a surprise. I've got the Heisman winner at number 3. So Smith is the third receiver for me. I've got Waddle 2 and Chase as my top receiver, but very interested to see what everyone else has.
Yeah, pleased you mentioned it, Henry, and somehow we've got exactly the same opinion. Ja'Marr Chase for me is number 1, Jalen Waddle's number 2, and Devonta Smith is number 3. And it sounds so disrespectful to say that for Devonta Smith, given his season, the 6th best receiving yards total for a college football receiver on record. Had an incredible year, largely helped by the fact that Jalen Waddle was injured. And Ja'Marr Chase didn't play this year. You know, it's such a tough spot. You're basically considered as the wide receiver 1. You basically have nothing to gain by taking part in this season. You no longer have Joe Burrow as your quarterback. You can only realistically go down or kind of cement yourself in the position you've already been set in. It's like these players who they declare for the draft after their sophomore or junior seasons. And the reason they do that is to guarantee money at the NFL level, you know, like we all would. So the only real knock on Ja'Marr Chase is that, and I don't think you can blame him at all or read into it. When you look at his numbers and what he did, when he was a wide receiver 1, Justin Jefferson was a wide receiver 2. And we've seen Justin Jefferson, you know, that's the flaw, surely. Chris, what are your thoughts on the top 3?
For me, I totally agree with both of you guys with Ja'Marr Chase. You know, he's sat out this, he's opted out of this year, and he's still arguably most people's number 1 off the board in terms of wide receivers. So that tells you how good he was in Joe Burrow's excellent season before he was drafted. Obviously, he's had a year off. You could argue perhaps that impacts his freshness, but then again, you could argue that a year of rest makes him a bit more energy in the tank, so to speak. So for me, it's Ja'Marr Chase. You know, he's got a muscular build, and he's added a bit more muscle this year too, apparently. Good hands, he can stretch the field and can also be effective at the short distances. So yeah, Ja'Marr Chase is my first receiver this year. Then I have gone Devonta Smith, number 2. Saw him obviously towards the back end more predominantly in the college playoff bowls, and obviously, as you mentioned, won the Heisman. Super speedy, good hands, and the ability to beat a man, a good all-round receiver. Fantastic season. I brought up the stats earlier. He scored 23 touchdowns, and he had 1,856 yards, which is 663 more than the second, which is a disgusting amount. And yes, he had more targets, but he averaged 1.7 or 2 yards greater than the next best. I think it was 17 or to 15 or something like that. But my only worry with Devonta Smith is he's so small. He's so tiny. If you look at him compared to Ja'Marr Chase, for example, there's barely nothing on him. So the only negative could be that maybe he might be injury prone, but you can't factor that in necessarily. He still may bulk up a bit. But he's not got the same build as Ja'Marr Chase. That's why he's number 2 for me. And then I've got Waddle, his Alabama Crimson Tide colleague. This guy, the first thing I wrote is this guy is fast. This guy is so fast. He can take a play to the house from like a quick slant on his own 5. And he's able to throw in some some contested catches as well, but not too much. I think this guy can be a real yards after catch monster. Honestly, so watching some of his film from this year has been electrifying.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I did a sort of NFL best case comparison for the guys, and for me, Jalen Waddle, it's Tyreek Hill. You know, there were elements of Stephon Diggs, but it's Tyreek Hill. Maybe not quite that elite level of athleticism, but definitely comparable. For Jamar Chase, it was Julio Jones. You know, big lofty comparison. That's if everything goes his way. And Devonta Smith was the two Tampa Bay receivers. I was sat there and I was thinking, he reminds me a lot of Mike Evans. You know, he's not a similar build, but he reminds me a lot in how he plays. And Chris Godwin, elite route running and body control, which I think will put him in good stead. And it's such an interesting class that we seem to not put as much weight on route running this year around. You know, usually it's the top route runner that ends up at the top of the class, but I think you would say Devonta Smith is the top route runner, and he hasn't reached that point. Connor, do you agree? You're happy with the sort of general consensus that Jamar Chase is number one?
Yeah, I would think so too. Yeah, I think the only person for me who's probably competing up there for his spot is Jalen Waddle, but I think Jamar Chase does just take that spot from him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and which one of them does go first.
Yep, absolutely. Henry, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I loved hearing your comparisons there, Josh. That's really interesting. I wrote down a couple as well. So for me, for Waddle, I actually did have Tyreek Hill, but I agree, not quite the explosiveness, not quite the change of direction speed. The other one I had is actually Deshaun Jackson, a little bit of Deshaun Jackson for Waddle. For Smith, I went a bit of a different route, and I actually went for Odell Beckham. As a slight build, really strong hands at the catch point, but perhaps not. He's not going to have yards after the catch in terms of through contact. A lot of the time in the NFL, I think he's going to go down on first contact because that's slight frame. I think he's got quite a bit of way to go with the route running to match OBJ. And Jamar Chase, yeah, I think Julio's quite a good shout there. Mine was AJ Green. Same draft class, same sort of vibe there. So that's really interesting to see those. I hope we're gonna talk about a non-wide receiver in a bit who might be challenging these as well, Josh.
Yeah, we will. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pose a question to you after we've kind of outlined it of where does he fit in for everyone. And I think it's a good question. We ran a poll. So obviously that player in question is Kyle Pitts, the best tight end definitely in this class. And everyone, we asked, you know, our Twitter fans where they saw everyone, and Kyle Pitts did get a vote as the best pass catcher in the class. So I'll be interested to hear in a bit. But before we go there, let's talk about the sort of next levels down. And for me, there's one player who realistically separates themselves from the others and establishes that fourth receiver spot, and that is Rondale Moore. His 2018 season, so his freshman season, his statistics were incredible. He was an All-American, over 1,300 yards, I believe. But then he had one injury-plagued season in 2019. The team played 13 games in 2020, so he hasn't matched those standards. But when I was giving him an NFL player comparison, I had to go for Tyreek Hill as well. You know, it was just the same mold again. The only concern for me is he just existed in a division against the college competition where he didn't have to demonstrate his superior route running talents. Schemes were always designed to get him the ball as soon and as quick as possible, which means he doesn't get to show off that route tree. So I would be interested to see how that translates to the NFL. But from your sides, Henry, did you have anyone who you specifically saw as number 4?
Yeah, interesting that you picked out Rondelle Moore. I did enjoy watching his tape as well, and someone who has been linked with the Packers on occasion at the back of the first round. So definitely someone that I'm interested in seeing. Interesting, you went Tyreek Hill. I can see the explosiveness. I didn't see that level of athleticism. I didn't think that the top end speed was there as well. I saw him getting chased down a couple of times, which I was kind of surprised about. So my comp that I went for was actually Steve Smith. that sort of like can run through a bit of contact, can lower the shoulder, plays really tough. So that was one that I had. The one for me that I would really like, that I think could sneak into the first round is Kadarius Toney. So he's my fourth receiver at the moment from Florida, who's Kyle Pitts' teammate. Really liked Toney. I think he had more burst than I expected. Good hands, yards after the catch as well. Obviously a similar type of frame to Moore in terms of under 6 foot. Can win in the slot, but just had a bit more juice for me, I think. And the comp that I went for Toney was actually Randall Cobb. Probably not a guy you want as your first receiver, but can win from the slot, can win outside, and has good explosiveness and athleticism. So Toney for me was the one that I like as number 4 at the moment.
Yeah. Toney for me sat number 5. My comparison was Tyler Lockett for him, but love the description. Chris, how about for you? Who was sat at number 4 for you?
It's Toney for me. I was listening to Henry there, and I was just nodding along. Completely agree. I think Rondelle Moore and Kadarius Toney are very similar in watching their film. But outside of Ja'Marr Chase and Devonta Smith, this is the guy that probably got me most excited. The way he can beat a man at the line, like, he's basically breaking ankles, weaving in between tackles. This guy really, I was like watching it thinking, oh, this guy's good. He's going to get people off their seats, and that's what fans want. But I think he can make a play as well. So I wonder if he'll get the opportunity to make the defenders look as silly in the NFL as the defense is going to be upper level. But this is definitely a guy to watch in my opinion. And like I said, Rondale Moore, similar to Toney for me, quick feet, very shifty. But I think sometimes he seems to try and overcomplicate his route running and tries to maybe double back once, twice too many. But again, a really exciting prospect, and it's definitely another one to be careful of. But Toney is my 4th.
Perfect. Yeah. And I'm assuming that means that you both had Rondale Moore as number 5, did you? Or did you? Yep. Henry, what about for you?
Yeah, I'm not sure I've quite made up my mind. I'm interested in Rashad Bateman. I think it's a really hard projection. My comp for him was actually T. Higgins, who was drafted last year. Similar frame. I don't think he's as powerful as Higgins. I think he'll struggle more with contested catches than Higgins did this year. But I think he's fast. He looks really fast for a big receiver, faster than Higgins was. So he's got that going for him. I think at the moment, yes, I would go Rondelle Moore 5th. But very, very different as well. You know, if you're looking for that outside receiver contested catch, then Bateman is interesting, I think.
Yeah, completely agree. And for me, that tier, Rondale Moore, Kadarius Toney, and Rashad Bateman are the clear next tier of receivers. The thing with Rashad Bateman, because you brought it up perfectly, Henry, he's got such a tantalizing combination of athleticism, build, and all the things you're really looking for. But for me, he was the first prospect in the wide receiver class that I saw, and I saw a really key, consistent knock on him. And that is that he just constantly tries to run with the ball before he's caught it and secured it. And we see that routinely at the NFL level having such an impact. When you don't make the separation the same way, if you're not looking to secure passes, if you don't high point them, if you don't come to them, and you're trying to run with the ball, turn your body, you're always at risk of fumbling, losing it, forcing an incomplete pass. And that makes such a difference at the NFL level. So hopefully that doesn't translate to the NFL. My comparison was Allen Robinson. Obviously that catching trait's not something which is matched, but the overall aspects were Allen Robinson for me. But then let's talk about wide receiver 7. I think we had a quick mini debate before, and it sounds like we're all agreed that that's Terrace Marshall over Nico Collins. Sorry, we never even had that discussion. I've just made that up. I just realized. Henry, for you, was Terrace Marshall your number 7? And that was for me, Terrace Marshall was.
Yeah, that's leading the witness a bit, I think there. No, I was actually, of all the receivers I've watched so far, and really I've watched the top 10 in the class so far, Terrace Marshall was one of the ones where I came away the least impressed. I think all of the others look like they're dominating the competition, and I just didn't feel that way about Marshall. I don't think he stood out with any particular trait on the field, apart from perhaps that he's 6'4" and playing receiver. So for me, I haven't been that impressed at all by him. Elijah Moore, of Ole Miss is someone who I thought stood out, and in terms of separation and speed, big playability, stood out far more for me. So I think currently Elijah Moore would be my wide receiver 7. Another interesting player to mention is Jalen Darden. There's a lot of YouTube highlights flying around. He's a receiver from North Texas, 5'9", but absolutely electric. I expect he'll run pretty fast, but potentially a mid-round kind of receiver who could return punts and kicks is quite an interesting player. If you've got 5 minutes to watch on YouTube, it's sort of that Tavon Austin highlight reel that's pretty electric.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to have led the witness, and I was completely misinformed. I kind of, I really stuck to. I just wanted to incorporate some big-bodied receivers, so I looked at Nico Collins and Terrace Marshall. For me, Terrace Marshall, it's always tough to really assess a player who's been a third wide receiver on a depth chart, like he had at LSU. He did have some good performances in 2020. I kind of viewed him as like a Keenan Allen, but with slightly more speed in his best case scenario. But there's a lot left that leave questions for him. But then, for me, my actual 7th receiver is Dyami Brown from North Carolina. I think if you go take a look at what he's done, similar style player that you were talking about with Darden. Not quite the same athletic build. He's slightly taller, but a clear potential wide receiver 1, in my opinion. And then the last spot, realistically, number 9, probably even worse when you start to analyze the rest of the class, is Nico Collins from Michigan. And I just think it was so disappointing looking at him. Such a big-bodied guy, serious big-body receiver, but I've never seen someone who can't consistently high point a catch the same way he can't. He could be 5'9" and he could make the catches where he makes them. He could be 5'4" and he could make catches where he makes them. It's ridiculous. So maybe he starts to show up. Maybe a good coach in the NFL gets hold of him. But it was a Kenny Golladay at best case. Doesn't get any separation. Maybe he starts to high point and win some contested catches, but definite drop off after number 6 in the class. Is that your opinion as well, Henry?
Yeah, Nico Collins is one of the last evaluations I've done. I agree. There's definitely, when you get to this level, 3rd round receiver, you're going to have flaws. There's going to be clear flaws, whether that's speed, separation, hands, like you said, contested catchability, even though you're a large receiver. I think he has some impressive highlight reel plays. I think he's deserves to be drafted, but yeah, it's going to be a work in progress for sure. But maybe the NFL coaching after a few years will see that. Having that frame and that skill set is valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are the ones which come back and bite you when you look back at your pre-draft grades and where they end up. They can always turn into amazing players. But guys, we took a look at it. Let's pose this question: if we change the rankings from top wide receivers and we change it to top pass catchers, where is Kyle Pitts? Chris, where does Kyle Pitts slot in for you? What number?
I think looking at him, he's a bit of a hybrid. He's not quite a tight end. He's not quite a wide receiver. You could probably play both. A bit of a utility piece almost. A lot of the time, it takes 2+ guys to bring him down. He's absolutely huge. I think he's 6'6". I think I saw somewhere, which I can't even fathom at my height. He's huge. And he could definitely be a red zone impact for whichever team he goes to. Good hands, great physicality. 12 touchdowns this year. I think he and Tony, both obviously from Florida, will probably be next to each other in my rankings. I haven't quite decided which one would go ahead. Perhaps it would be Pitts. He was a bit more productive. As I said, 12 touchdowns rather than 10. So potentially it's Pitts, but not by much.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Good point about the Florida prospects. I think there's one thing we can all agree on. They made Kyle Trask look a hell of a lot better than Kyle Trask is. That's for sure. And, there's only one NFL comparison for this guy, right, Henry? I'm confident without saying anything that we've got the same name. It's Darren Waller, isn't it? If he went as a wide receiver, would he be going as highly? Who knows? And maybe he's found the position earlier than Darren Waller did. But for me, he slots in at number 3 in the rankings, just ahead of Devonta Smith, in my opinion, purely based on the fact that you know what you're getting. I think tight ends are significantly harder to evaluate at the college level because the college defense schemes haven't kind of figured out what they want to do against tight ends yet. But I think there's that question mark about Devonta Smith. There's no question mark for me about Kyle Pitts. What's your opinion, Henry?
So for me, Pitts is the top pass catcher in this draft. I think Kyle Pitts is ridiculously special. I think he's got the potential to be better than Darren Waller, who I'd consider as a top 3 NFL tight end. I think Pitts, I don't think we've seen a tight end prospect like Pitts for 10 years. And I think he fully deserves to be a top 10 pick. If the quarterback class wasn't as good as it is, I think he's a top 5 pick. I think he's that good. And I would take him over every receiver in this class currently. I think he's that special. So I think, like you said, Josh, I think his floor is incredibly high. I think his floor is somewhere near Darren Waller. And I think his ceiling is to be the best tight end in the NFL. One of the reasons why I would take him in the top 10 is you can take Pitts at, let's say, 6. And you could get Elijah Moore. You could perhaps even get Rondelle Moore in the second round. The gap between Pitts and the next tight end is enormous, absolutely enormous. And even if he was just a wide receiver, I'd take him top. So yeah, I can see Chris laughing about my hot take there. But yeah, that's my opinion. I think Pitts is ridiculously special. I think wherever he goes, he'll make that offense better. And yeah, just love what he brings.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. I love it as well because, frankly, it is such a good point. I mean, tight end is a position where we see what a difference that makes to an offense in the NFL. So completely can see the merit there, and maybe we'll get onto that one later when we do look at some teams and what they might be doing. But yeah, incredible. We can't talk about a tight end and not go to our tight end expert, that is Connor. Connor, if you were going to slot him in, do you rank him as highly as Henry does?
I like, in my life, every day is National Tight End Day, and yeah, I can only see Henry's comments coming from where that speciality of the tight end position kind of allows him to be. Obviously, he's got the physicality that Chris has mentioned, but yeah, that skill positioning, what's required of a tight end nowadays, does make me question, like if they're considering him going in as a wide receiver, is just that because of the nature of what the tight end role now demands coming into the NFL with what we see out of some of the best performing established tight ends in the NFL. So I would like to see him stay as a tight end because he'll only do justice to our society and to our club, and I would welcome him with open arms for sure.
And for any of our listeners wondering, I'm pretty sure Connor would play tight end if he was on a football field. You got the build for it, Connor, haven't you?
I do. I have considered it a lot over the years. If I ever played football here in the UK, I would go in and put myself up for tight end position.
What Henry was alluding to there, which is what we found out last week, which is probably the reason why Connor loves tight ends so much, is that his first experience at an NFL stadium in America, college football game, someone confused him as a tight end, to which Connor's reaction was, tight ends are wham. So that is forever the course of love.
How can you not love a tight end?
Yeah, you